introduce you to Guido, who is a very, very, very good friend. We go back long time, and as I usually say, many kilos ago, he's still very thin. I'm not. And we used to work together at McKinsey, and we had a lot of days and nights and weekends working together, which has built a great friendship. And also when, you know, he decided, I mean, I left McKinsey before him, but we always stayed together and very much in contact. And when he decided to set up a venture that he's gonna probably share some insight on tonight, you know, he actually started by sharing, we were sharing the same office. So we, in many respects, have been part of a journey, which is quite an incredible journey. I'm sure that he will share about. But what is important about Guido is not too much his success, but the person he is. He is a person that is always very kind. He always spends time with people, regardless of the fact that he's super busy. Like today, he found the time to spend 3 hours with us and share some of his experiences and potentially wisdom. So I can only thank him so much and for being with us tonight. And I leave the floor to him, and I'm sure he will share some interesting insight and then open up the floor to questions. So Guido, thank you again on my behalf and on behalf of ESCP Business School and of the panelists and all the students. We are really glad and honored to have you here.
Thank you very much, David. You know, it's my pleasure and my honor, and you know, of course, you know, it's a super friendship. We were incubated actually in your offices. We were not sharing offices. We were actually incubated there, and also your support in setting up the organizational model. We will talk about that. Also, was very critical. It was a pleasure also to spend time today with the students, because I'm really impressed about the quality of them. In the meantime, I will start sharing charts so that I have them ready. I was quite impressed about the quality of the work and the MVPs, and quite intrigued actually. A lot of the ideas would deserve a follow-up. As I said to some of the teams with whom I had the opportunity to spend time, you know, I hope that you will keep an eye, or at least this experience was a way to start instilling the entrepreneurship bug, and I will talk about that a little bit. I hope that my profile is a good omen for many of you, because I'm not sure if I'm super qualified to talk about tech entrepreneurship, because the narrative that we get normally about tech entrepreneurship, deep tech, is about college dropouts, about people with some dysfunctional behaviors, etc., etc. And very rarely you hear about somebody that studied or that has qualifications or that worked, you know, in professionally sound corporations or services. In reality, you know, my profile is less rare than it sounds, because if you look at actually the statistics, a lot of the successful entrepreneurs come from having studied, having spent time in large corporations or small corporations, but essentially having learned. And despite the fact that, of course, the story of the college dropout that didn't study and was immediately successful and is dysfunctional but still managed to be successful is very appealing to the media, the reality is it's very good to study. And so what you're doing, for instance, the experience that you just had with these projects is truly helpful. The other thing that I hope this experience made you think about is how much of an entrepreneur or an innovator you are. And that's really something that I hope you look deep into yourself and you have time to decide. You know, in my case, actually, I was a laggard. I spent 14 years at McKinsey before deciding to take a jump and start becoming an entrepreneur. You know, maybe I took too long, but you have time. It's important that you look into yourself. Are you an innovator? Are you an entrepreneur? Versus the possibility to be a very successful professional with a salary. And here the difference, you know, the definition of Jean-Baptiste of entrepreneur is somebody that is able to shift resources from lower productivity to higher productivity. In general, I like to distinguish innovator from entrepreneur. If I have to look at the work that most of the teams have done, currently you focused a lot of attention on the innovator part, which is building a product. An entrepreneur is a builder. An innovator builds a new product, builds a new system, a new service that solves a clear problem. The entrepreneur is kind of like that, but not necessarily just that. The entrepreneur builds a machine, builds a company that creates value. And this is actually something that is connected to innovation, but sometimes not necessarily the same thing. So for you, ask yourself, am I an innovator? Am I an entrepreneur? Am I both an innovator and entrepreneur? And when there is both innovation and entrepreneurship, there is the potential for exponential entrepreneurship. So the type of entrepreneurship with exponential returns, both for yourself and for society, which is very important. On this, also another categorization that for me was particularly helpful when I was studying at MIT, I remember that it made me think is really, if you want to become an entrepreneur, think about the difference between creating a company that is a product company versus a service company, because the two things are radically different and will shape in a major way the type of things that you do. And both of them are perfectly valuable. They are just very different. The product is something that is a thing, essentially can be a physical product or a digital product. If it's a digital product, it can scale massively across the globe without logistics and problems. If it's a service, it depends on humans. So if you want to build a company that is a service company, you will have to deal with a lot of humans. And so, you know, this kind of gives you also an idea where your orientations are. The other important thing, if you want to be an entrepreneur, is the level of ambition that you have in terms of return on investment. Return on investment, actually here, I would like to, you know, it's considering that we are not so many, I would like to ask a little question. In your opinion, what's the typical return on investment that an entrepreneur looks for? If you had to say, you know, you can actually write answers in the general thing. If you want to write some numbers, you know, what would you say? What would be a good number? Let's see if I see the responses, but just to avoid that it's just a one-way discussion. Voila. Okay, 10%. I see. Okay, very good. Very good number, Elias. In reality, no, it's more. 10% is it would be a pretty low rate of return for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs typically, but it's still higher than traditional markets, because consider that if you go for stock market, a good long-term return is between 5 to 7%. If you go on private equity and things like this, it is around 10%. So, you know, selective investments are there. Entrepreneurs normally look for 15 to 20% per year. Exactly. You know, I see there, Stefano, 20% per year. But actually, I would encourage also a higher level of ambition, because if we look at who tries to really go hockey stick and actually create unicorns, then rate of returns can be much higher, even 50 to 100% per year compounded for several years. And 100% per year is a very nice number, because it means you put $1 million, after 8 years, you have 256. So it's actually a pretty good one. But it's actually what happens when you create unicorns. And and unicorns are not just mythological creatures, they do exist. And so, you know, also for you, I would encourage to think, if you want to be an entrepreneur, what's your level of ambition? Do you want to be a good entrepreneur, 20% return? Do you want to be somebody that tries to push the envelope and goes for a higher risk, but a dramatically higher return? So 2 words on what I'm up to, you know, because, you know, I thank Davide a lot for the introduction. I'm still in the process, in the sense that, you know, I like, you know, to call success when it's really finished. You know, now it's still a very illiquid success, as the Wolf of Wall Street would say, for who watched the movie, when they say on paper, you know, it's like, because it's not fully finished. But in any case, what I'm up to is a unicorn attempt, and actually one of the not very few unicorn attempts that there are in the UK. And in general, unicorn attempts, especially in the deep tech market, are something like this. It's actually, this is how I feel when I picture this adventure. For people that remember when a shuttle departs, you have a moment when there's like a lot of smoke and a lot of noise, and it's very blah, and nothing moves for some time. It's like, essentially you have all this mess, and then it doesn't move by a millimeter, and then all of a sudden poof, it starts, and hopefully it goes to the high skies and it doesn't explode. So the whole thing is really creating the effect where it reaches the space station or whatever, instead of exploding in the air. But a unicorn attempt is in many ways something like this. And in our case, it's been really like this. In terms of this adventure, we piled up an impressive amount of smoke and noise. We provided inspiration for a lot of components of the HBO TV show Silicon Valley. For people that watched it, Pied Piper is very much inspired to our own Perseus technology. And for people that have seen Erlich Bachmann, the co-founder, we actually have Eric Achman, and I'm actually scared to say that some of the things attributed to the CEO happen in reality also to me. There were thousands of articles in the media. We won very prestigious awards, including a United Nations award as media innovator. Lots of very big partners. Sometimes we are also mentioned, our name is mentioned next to people like Netflix, YouTube, people that are much, much larger in size than we are. And actually also costly adventure, tens of millions of pounds burned, I would say invested, but essentially so far burned. And in terms of revenues, essentially less than a little shop in your favorite shopping mall, less than £1 million in 2020 revenue. So, this kind of depiction of a lot of smoke and a lot of things that happen, but you don't see it necessarily with the KPI of revenues, and we will talk about that. So what do we do? At Vinova, we tackle a challenge that is very exciting, at least to me, and it's accelerating the future of digital. In digital, we have a lot of things that are changing the way in which we consume media, but not just media, also other very important things like healthcare and other things that are all relying on transmitting, analyzing, processing, storing media, whether it's pictures, video, or even more immersive stuff. And we are a company like Dolby. People, when you say codecs, which is practically what we do, it's difficult to understand what they are. But if you think Dolby, everybody imagines better sounding sound. And that's the nature of compressing the signal better so that it can be delivered at a higher quality in a more efficient way, or analyzed also in terms of AI in a more efficient way. And what we do is accelerating by 5 to 10 years what is possible with today's devices. In particular, it's important because the world demands more and more digital media at a massive scale. It's not just to watch Netflix, but it's everything. It's video communication such as this one. It's drones, it's IoT, it's surgery that is done with the assistance of a surgeon that maybe is 10,000 kilometers away, but can actually give advice in real time to whoever is performing the surgery. It is all stuff like that. It's everywhere, and it's very important. And it's growing like crazy because the growth rates, if we take something like streaming that I'm sure you all do with social networks and others, it's growing at a very, very fast pace. For instance, if we just look the past 4 years of the Super Bowl final, we had 2.5 million viewers in streaming in 2016, and then it almost doubled, or it went to 4 million in the next year, and then 6, and then 7.5. They are like amazing growth rates because they compound. But 7.5 million is a very high number. But if we take the incumbent, traditional broadcasting, 110 million in US alone. So, you know, it's growing, growing, growing. It's very important. It's changing our life because it's the power of choice. We can choose what to watch when we want, wherever we are, in mobility. It's great, but still it's very small and tiny versus traditional means of fruition. Why? Because very often it doesn't work very well for people that may remember having tried to watch in high definition the recent Football World Cup. And so what we do is trying to fix that problem. Of course, part of the problem is trillions of dollars in infrastructural investments, in putting more fiber, in putting 5G, etc. But also part of the equation is making the pipes more efficient by compressing better, so that we can be more efficient at using those pipes. And in particular, we created two international standards. One is they are both very fresh, actually. One is MPEG-5 LCVC, which actually allows to compress 40% better at twice lower processing costs. And it can be used with today's devices, so just a software upgrade. So I hope it's something that you all will be able to experience very soon in social networks. It's, without even knowing, hopefully what you should see is just that it works better. Very, very likely you won't even know why. Because we don't have money for consumer branding investments. But actually it should work relatively quickly. And the other standard is VC6, which is quite exciting because delivery of video is one thing, but making machines more intelligent at analyzing images, video, and other similar things is also quite exciting. And it's important for many applications in all realms, not just media, but for instance, healthcare, for instance, automotive, for autonomous drive, security, safety, etc. So that's us. That's what we are doing, and that's our little adventure. If we want to take some takeaway from this adventure, especially why it's more rare to have adventures like this in these midsts than it is in Silicon Valley, which is the land where companies trying to do things like these normally exist and operate. We can say a very important figure that I hope we will be able to change and influence in the next decades. If we look at how many unicorns are created in the world versus the amount of startups that are created in the world, we see something that I personally don't like very much, and I think is something we all need to contribute changing. In the US, we have 45% of startups and 50% of unicorns. In EMEA, which includes the UK, it's essentially UK in Europe because the MEA part, so Middle East and Africa, contribute little. We have 36% of startups and 14% of unicorns. Unicorn, by the way, a unicorn is a company that grows so fast that when it's still a private company is worth more than $1 billion. So that's kind of the definition of unicorn. So a company, a hyper growth company that becomes a multi-billion entity, typically pretty fast. So in a handful of years rather than in several decades, as would be the case normally. In Asia, actually, we see a situation like the US or potentially even better, 17% of startups and 33% of unicorns. So it seems that like there's something bad happening in Europe that does not create unicorns. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but many of these reasons, frankly, are excuses. They come mostly from the way in which a unicorn is created, which, you know, I go back to the shuttle analogy that we had before. First of all, you know, how many of you know or even better have read the book from Geoffrey Moore called Crossing the Chasm? Is anybody aware of that book? You know, even just with a yes or no, you know, is anybody?
My students, they might have heard it from me a few times.
Okay, very good. Yeah, exactly, because, you know, it's like it's the Bible of Silicon Valley. And I personally had studied it left and right. I studied it at UT, I studied it at MIT, and boy, I had not learned anything in the sense that living it, I finally understood it, but I must confess that I almost died in the chasm. So after spending a few years in the chasm, I finally understood what it is. So sometimes you really need to leave things. So I'll try to be more vocal about what it is, because if anybody of you wants to do it, I would like that they know it better than I did, despite having read the book. When you do a big technology innovation that wants to be exponential, so wants to scale to the entire planet very quickly, and it's typically software. The reason why tech is more prone to unicorns is that if it's software and if you do it right, you can immediately scale at a global level, very little cost, very little logistics, and boom, you can literally take off and go up. But the most important thing, if you're doing something like that, the product must be perfect. And the product being perfect requires a lot of assistance from customers, because the only way to design a product in a way that serves well a market is, of course, doing it with customers. Now, there's a problem with that. Typically, it's very easy at the beginning of a tech adventure to be seduced by early adopters. Early adopters are people that love your value proposition, that when you talk and when you say what you want to do, they are like looking at you with like eyes that look like little hearts. You know, they're very seduced and they're like, oh my God, this is great. And they pay you for something that is incomplete. Maybe they pay you even before you did the MVP. You know, they finance the MVP with a Kickstarter like campaign because they are so enamored of that they love it. And sometimes the risk is you believe them. And actually, to make a very simple analogy, in an automotive analogy that we all can understand, if I created an engine that has like 1,000 horsepower and consumes nothing, it does like 300 kilometers with a liter of gas, great engine, phenomenal. And I do a car, and if I find an early adopter that loves engines, she or he will be all about it, will be like, oh my God, this engine is fantastic, your car is phenomenal, etc. And maybe the car is missing air conditioning and missing leather seats, missing a trunk. And then, essentially you have these early adopters that wouldn't tell you, would just clap because of your engine and would tell you, oh my God, your engine is phenomenal. And in general, they will be very experienced at tinkering with the car, so they will deal with the air conditioning themselves without even telling you. So, you are there and you think, oh my God, I can conquer the world. And you get to this phase, which is where about half of tech startups die, where you are like doing this projection, because given your early adopters, you think your product is ready to scale, and it's not. Because then you start talking with the early majority, which is people like me, for instance, in cars, and they will say, phenomenal engine, I do love it, but I also want an air conditioning system, and I want leather seats and the trunk, and possibly also black paint and not just red. And these guys will tell you, no problem, I'll buy it when you have done all of those things, which are typically maybe 3 to 4 years of work. And that's where you die, because if you didn't plan for it, and if you don't have the financing to deal with that, you don't have the time to run this moment, which is called chasm, sometimes also named as valley of desolation or valley of pain, which is where you are at total risk of death, because you may have a phenomenal product, a phenomenal technology, but it's still not ready to scale. And you need to work with all of these customers that are picky. They are no longer these ones. These are very few. Sometimes you think that early adopters are everybody. Early adopters tend to be very few. You find them immediately. You are drugged and you believe that there are so many, and then you find that there are like 5 or 10 in the world, and that's it, finished, done. And while instead these guys are many, or gals, but actually they don't want to pay for a product that is not yet finished. You need to thank them if they work for free for you. So, if you give the product for free and they test it for you, giving you feedback, and then you need years to survive. And this game is actually very typical. This curve that I drew here also comes from a research from McKinsey that analyzed about 1,000 companies, most of them unicorns, very successful, companies that did the hockey stick type revenue profile. All of them inevitably follow this path. So they have a little bit of revenue growth with early adopters, then long valley of desolation to create the product. And then if they are successful, they go up. And if they're not, they die. What's the learning here is that if you want to play this game, which Silicon Valley learned how to play, it's not particularly difficult ultimately. There is a method to it, but there's also a catch. You need to survive for several years, burning cash, making no revenues, which means you need to stay strong and find the cash to do it. Also, you need the customers that give you that feedback. So a very strong customer orientation to do it. And that's also another reason why sometimes EMEA is not able to create unicorns, because we are missing the customers who give feedback. And that's why what it takes ultimately is all in our possibility, but it's more in our mindset to look for it in the right way. Because what it takes, first of all, of course, a vision. You know, there's no unicorn or no big attempt if you don't have a vision of something that could work. So, you know, that's the necessity for every enterprise, I would say. But if you want to do something like this, a global mindset is fundamental. So despite us being here, since the big companies are in the US and China, effectively, and a little bit in India, it's very important to deal with them. So I invite you, encourage you not to be afraid. If you're creating something that is revolutionary, in your opinion, if you are convinced about it, do not stop to the geography where you are. Just go to the biggest customers in the planet, even if they are in a different continent, it doesn't matter. It's possible to deal with that. Then we successfully dealt from London with companies that are all either in California or in Asia, no problem. You know, it's the world, especially now with COVID, everybody learned how to do it. And before COVID, you just take a few flights. And it's very important. And then you also need to attract a lot of funds. And that's actually also something that sometimes is more difficult here, but it's still possible. So it is not impossible and depends mostly on the mindset of who creates the adventure. Some learning from this, be ambitious, you know, don't be afraid of being ambitious. I would like to say to you that if your ambitions don't scare you, they're not high enough. And this might sound excessive, but it's not. Seriously, if your ambitions don't scare you, they're not high enough. As an entrepreneur, you must be ambitious. You must aim high. Also, because don't worry, the world will make you go a little bit lower. So it's important to aim high and push to get high. The other important thing is getting feedback constantly and critique yourself, because for some, the only difference between being a visionary and a madman is just that ultimately the visionary is right. But the approach in between is exactly the same, because when you're trying to do things like these, and again, it's always like this, so it's a constant, and you need to be ready for it if you want to pursue something like this, you are seeing things that most of the world doesn't see your way. And you may be right or you may be wrong, but the approach that you will have to pursue is pretty much the same obsessive approach with grit and relentlessness of a madman that despite everybody tells him, oh, no, it's different, you need to push for that. In doing so, it's very important to have the right advisors, because otherwise you're truly a madman. So having mentors, having coaches, having senior people and friends, like in my case, for instance, Davide, that you can rely on also to do a cross-check. Am I truly a madman, or I'm just a visionary that still needs to get it done? And that's really important also at an energetic level for you. So some key learnings, if I had to summarize, some learnings that possibly are useful for you, whether you want to go for something as crazy as trying to do to create a unicorn, or just become an entrepreneur, which is still important and very valuable. There are some key learnings that are always useful. At least they were to me. The first takeaway, I would like to say, is the #1 skill, in my opinion, to master. And it's especially important. It's true for everything, you know, whatever you want to do, really, not just entrepreneur, even if you want to just take a job, which is very valuable, and become a successful person in that way. The #1 skill to master in this world is being ready to adapt. And for people that are ambitious and achievers, very often we end up doing something right, because we learn, especially you're now in school, you're learning things, you learn to do well something. When you start being an entrepreneur, it happens pretty much every week, but in general, even if you live and you do other things, it happens frequently. The world moves. And so very often you are doing the right thing. And by the way, sorry, I didn't describe the world map, but as a good former consultant, everything can be summarized as a 2x2 matrix. And so in my opinion, a good vision of the world is that for everything, you can do the wrong thing or you can do the right thing, horizontal axis, and you can do it well or you can do it badly. So, you know, that's pretty much, you know, everything can be typically represented with a 2x2 matrix. If it's a really complex thing, a 3x3 matrix. But in this case, I think a 2x2 is fine. So you start and you learn to master something, and that's actually what you are. You're in a top school, you're learning things, you are becoming great at something. The world will move, and suddenly you will find yourself that you're doing well something that is no longer the right thing to do. And this happens surprisingly often. If you're an entrepreneur, it will happen regularly, every week or month, that something is shifting, your company is growing, and what made you successful in the previous phase is no longer what will make you successful in the next phase, and you need to adapt yourself or die or move away. And actually, when you find yourself in this situation, which is very frequent, and again, not just for entrepreneurs, for everybody. So the world move, and the right thing is no longer what you're doing. So you're doing very well. You're a master. You're great at doing the wrong thing, and you should be doing the right thing. So my question for you is, what's the only geometric trajectory in this map of the world to get from where you ended up, which is there on the top left, to where you should be, which, as always, in a 2x2 matrix is on the top right. This is typically where we want to be. So what's the only geometric trajectory, would you say? Okay, I have the comment. Exponential. Well, you know, exponential in this case, you know, I don't know how we would draw an exponential trajectory, but I would say that with an exponential trajectory, it's probably not working. If you meant this one. No, I meant really a geometric, you know, a geometric trajectory here. And consider that this is really true, and really, really true. A V-shaped trajectory, yes, exactly. Good point, Riccardo. Essentially, the only way, and there is no other way to get there where you want to be, is like this. And this seems trivial. It seems trivial geometry, but it has, personally for me, you know, when I drew the first time this thing, I realized that this is possibly the most important skill to learn in life ever. Because as consultants also, I was a consultant, and it's very typical for a consultant to go to a client and to say, oh, look, you know, you're here, and obviously because of this, you should go here, right? You know, easy. So, you know, implicitly, it seems to be saying that the trajectory is like, oh, simple, move from doing the wrong thing to doing the right thing, right? You know, so simple, why aren't you doing? Are you stupid or what? Reality is not like this, because if you want to start doing the right thing, you start and you're not capable of doing it. You move from being a master at doing the wrong thing to being completely inept at doing the right thing. And notice that when you're here, probably your results are worse than when you were here. And that's where many resistance to change that come from senior people and people that are maybe gurus in their field, they come not from the fact that they don't realize that they should go here, but because they realize that in order to get here, they need to pass from being ridiculed, from being very, very sorry, because that's, again, the valley of desolation. That's, you need to move to a place that is very painful. And you need a lot of confidence in when you're here, and you're worse off than when you were here, in saying, in trusting that you can go up, that you can learn fast enough before you die. Because from a company point of view, it means that when you go in the bottom right, you're burning more money potentially. And maybe some people attack you and tell you, oh my God, you worsen things. And you need confidence in yourself, confidence in what you're doing, and confidence in the fact that you can move vertically very, very high. But this characteristic of like understanding this and managing this is fundamental. And in part, it's also, in part is also grit. So it's really relentlessness and, you know, not crying, not being a crybaby, but being a little bit like Rocky, you know, it's like you get a punch, you rise up again. And, but also confidence in yourself and ability to be quick at learning. So this is actually, I believe, the #1 skill to master, and it's mostly here in our mind. It's ability to embarrass ourselves. It's not having the entitlement to say, if I was very good at doing something, then I'm very good at doing whatever. No, you will start by being very poor. You know, personally for me, when I moved from being admittedly a pretty good McKinsey consultant to be a completely awful CEO of a tech company, I was completely conscious that I was an awful CEO of a tech company. I had to learn, you know, hopefully I did, but you know, definitely a lot of my guys still say that it's a miracle we survived. There's another takeaway that is important, especially if you want to be in tech or to be in innovation, and is learning how to manage so-called unmanageable people. If you saw narratives from the Silicon Valley, we know that it's very frequent, and especially for considering that most of you have a business background or engineering background, but also with a business twist. It's important for radical innovation and exponential innovation to deal with creative thinkers, what I called creative thinkers, which are not innovators. There's a difference between innovators and creative thinkers. Creative thinkers are people that are able to violate norms, to go against what everybody thinks, and to invent something radically new. And they are fundamental, critical as a spark for innovation. Very often, however, they are not innovators, because innovators are also people that are able to work in team, to create trade-offs and compromise in order to create a product that works. And a good idea is not a product that works. And a good idea done by one person will never make, in today's world, a successful product. So it's very important to understand this. And if you want to master an exponential growth company, you need to have creative thinkers. It's fundamental. But you need also to manage them like nitroglycerin, and knowledgeable that they will explode if you touch them in a certain way, and knowledgeable that they are not innovators. So you cannot assign to them roles that they cannot fulfill. They will always be challenging everything. They will be challenging themselves. They will be trying to destroy even their own baby, because they always want something new. So they are fundamental as a spark, but don't try to use them for more than what they are. And again, you know, there are a lot of examples if you think about Hollywood and what you know, stories like Apple stories, Wozniak, etc. It's very frequent, but it's also very real. And this requires also on your part recognition and understanding of your people, because selecting correctly the people that you choose as your responsible parties is possibly the most important decision as an entrepreneur. The third takeaway that was very important for me, and actually, to be honest, I believe I need to thank Davide for that, because it was one of the first things that he told me and resonated very well with me. is moving from good decision making, so spending time to make the perfect decision and kind of pondering, etc., to as much as possible reversible decision making. So making sure that you decide quickly, you fail quickly, and change quickly. So choose a decision that is changeable, because very likely you're wrong, because you're operating in a context where you don't have enough information. You need to test with customers. You need to see what's wrong, what's right. Don't spend too much time to think that you can make the perfect decision, because in reality you are trying to tell the time with millisecond precision with a sundial in your hand. Don't waste too much time, because you won't get it right. Just try to change quickly and adapt as soon as you find that it's wrong. So it's really, this concept of reversible decision making is very important, because it influences the nature of the type of decisions and what good decision looks like. And then the fourth, and again, Davide, you're very protagonist in this, but it's not brown nosing. It's actually very true, because we spent a lot of time talking about it. This is my own definition of company innovation quotient, and actually Davide helped me a lot to implement it in practice. Company innovation quotient means how innovative is really your company and the system that you are building. A caveat about this, if I think about the presentation that I saw before, they were very oriented to the product, much more than to building a system that works regardless of you, for instance. And being an entrepreneur, it's really creating a machine, machine made of people, essentially, but you need to create a system that works. And so an organization, the organizational component is fundamental, and it's also costly. So for instance, in many of the estimates that I saw earlier, they were possibly very optimistic, because there are costs in setting up a machine, in setting up a system that works. But also in making this organization working, an innovative company has this characteristic, that the ratio SP divided by BAU is pretty high, and would anybody dare to try to say what SP and BAU are? Let's try with another poll. BAU is possibly the easiest to estimate. I'm talking about organizational traits of a company. So if you had to try and say who wants to shoot, it's difficult. It's difficult. Don't worry to be wrong. It's like it's totally fine. Even if you say there's no wrong answer. Yes, somebody wants to say something. Okay, BAU, business as usual. Perfect, Ricardo. Yes, absolutely. BAU is business as usual, and SP, what could it be? So the ratio between SP and business as usual. SP would be special projects. So essentially, in a company, you have business as usual, which is running the company, and then you have special projects, which are cross-functional projects that involve people from different departments, and essentially very difficult to just put in a department. They are not finance, marketing, engineering, they are everything. They are cross-functional, they are groups of people. And when the ratio of special projects versus BAU is high, essentially it means the exception is the rule. And how do you organize for that? Because the traditional org chart that many have in mind, like where you have the CEO, and then you have finance, and you have marketing, and you have product, or maybe engineering, depending on the company, you could have other departments. Doesn't work. It just doesn't work, because it's not the way, it wouldn't depict correctly the way in which people are working. Ultimately, an organization is a social network of people that are working together in teams in order to achieve stuff. And if special projects need to involve teams that are taken from different departments all the time, led by somebody that may not necessarily be a C-level, and where maybe the CEO could be a team member of that team, but not leading, just a team member, taking orders from somebody that maybe is not even a C-level, maybe is like an N-2 in the hierarchy. And this is completely normal. In my company, it happens very frequently. There may be a project led by somebody that is not even reporting to me, and in that project, I'm reporting to him. If I'm actually a team member, he leads or she leads because she knows more, and I follow. I just do my part in that project, but I'm not the CEO in that project, but I'm something else. And that's very important because there are several names for these organizations. Now, the most frequently used one is Agile. In the past, it was Lean. Then there was a moment when it was called Holacracy. When actually I studied in the 90s, it was called actually Mintzberger, the term for it, and I don't remember what it was, but there was also.
There is plenty more now. There is lattice organization, shape forming organization,
Exactly, but the interesting thing, the interesting thing is that it's always the same thing because Catholic Church and other institutions had it even before organization was created. But it's really important, and as Davide would confirm, not easy because thank you again for your help in setting it up. But you remember how difficult it was to create such a system because it's not trivial. How do you say somebody that is a CCO, for instance, that in certain cases he will not be boss and his people or her people will report for a project to somebody that is in a totally different department, and maybe it's very confusing to people that are used to hierarchy, but it's absolutely essential in order to thrive as an innovative company. And now more and more companies, even established ones, not just growing startups, need to organize like this because it's the right way to organize ourselves. It's also, especially when things change, and things change now also for big corporates, not just for growing startups. So it's like the norm now. Exception is the rule. And so being ready to live in these organizations, and I'm sure that, having Davide as teacher, I'm completely confident that you were instructed about this, but still do not underestimate the difficulty to create it in practice because it's really tough. The difference between knowing the way and walking the way, going back to the part, is very, very, very strong. And so, these are some of my learnings. I don't have any other charts. I try to pile up some of the things that thinking about what I learned from surviving so far in this adventure. And I hope that, I will keep doing so. There's my utmost commitment to finishing the last part of the curve. By the way, sorry, before, when I showed you this curve, there's a fun factoid about where we are with Vinova. Vinova is exactly theoretically here. So, we got to the point, if you read the, all the press about us, etc., the expectation is that now the hockey stick part starts, and I very much hope that it's true, but, time will tell. So, I just hope that this happens for real. But so far so good. It's been quite a ride and a lot of learning for sure. So that's pretty much it. That's what I had to say. I would like to open it to Q&A.
Thank you very much, Guido. And I'd like to see if there is anyone that wants to have some questions. We also have the luck of having a colleague of mine that is joining us, who is the head of the Jean-Baptiste Institute for Entrepreneurship, René Maurer. Because Guido, I might have told you several times, but you mentioned Jean-Baptiste, and that Jean-Baptiste is the founder of ESCP. And
absolutely,
so we are
in the right place
where everything started. Yeah. So maybe René may have a question for you, but if there is any student or any panelist that have a question, please just either write it in the chat or in the Q&A, and then we take it from there. Because we have the winners, and soon we will announce them. So Guido, I will ask you to announce the overall winner. René will announce. I will write you privately in the chat, and René will mention or give the award to the winner of the audience and the virtual stand, and Ellen Breen is gonna mention the award for the winner of the panel. of the panelists.
Awesome.
So, but before that, let's get to the question. I don't know, Rene, if you want to ask a question to Guido.
Yeah, in the meantime, I saw a question from Ricardo. I don't know if you want. Yeah, because actually it's a very poignant one. How do you face the Desolation Valley? You know, that's why I put it as learning number one. It's really from an energetic point of view, being able to sustain not just yourself, but the entire company, because everybody is looking at you as an entrepreneur. And in general, it's also true for top managers, you know, essentially all the top team of a startup, you know, have a lot of responsibility because the energetic level, you know, it seems very spiritual, but it's true, is very important. And so managing the Desolation Valley without desolation is very important. And actually, that's really what comes from you, because, and you need to really work a lot on yourself, because if you despair, everybody will leave. And so, you know, it's really internal personal strength, confidence, meditation, energy. You know, essentially you need to be like a Jedi, you know, and convey all the positive energy of the planet to energize yourself and give the power to your people to perform. It's really, it sounds very exoteric, but it's in part strategy and business and right decisions, etc. In very large part, not crying, you know, essentially it's like being strong and despite every adversity, despite every slap that you can get, rise up again and fight. So, you know, very much Rocky style, you know, and it's true for everybody that does this, you know, it's not absolutely typical. To me, I have a sort of friendship with other entrepreneurs that often we go out like, you know, you know, the association of alcoholism, and we all discuss about how it feels when you don't have the cash to pay at the finish, at the end of the month, which happens to every engineer and, you know, to every entrepreneur. And for instance, I provide a lot of advice to people that are in that phase that typically is in the first years. It happens almost all the time, and it's important to manage it in a proper way, etc. So yeah, no, it's really inside you and getting that strength.
Is Rene there? Yeah, Rene, do you want to ask a question to Guido? So Guido even mentioned Jean-Baptiste say among his definition of entrepreneur. So I'm very proud that the indoctrination has worked.
You did a great job, David. Super cool. Sorry, I was here, but I was also there where there was a second session with other campuses happening, and they were just closing. So I kind of had to go back and forth. I heard you say my name, and I said I cannot, you know, I have to kind of come up here. Yes, if I may, because you know, on the other side we were kind of trying to put together at least Paris, Madrid, and Berlin campus. Is there anything that you have for us? Basically the ESCP entrepreneurship community around the same Institute for Entrepreneurship, when it comes to what can we all do to work more on this, you know, on this continent, kind of the European markets, making more out of startups and making them European startups in a way. Is there any advice, any ideas, any visions you have?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Rene, because, you know, frankly, you know, I'm blessed to have a shareholding that includes mentors and people that supported me, etc. And one of my objectives, especially if I happen to be successful, not just in theory, let's say with theoretical money, but also, you know, with like a great exit or anything like that, to contribute. It comes from having people that lived the adventure, because what Europe is lacking is a bit of a chicken and egg thing, because I was lucky to have people like, for instance, Mr. Fagin in Silicon Valley, who did it like 3 times, multi-unicorns. And so he's a tycoon, that he's the creator of the microprocessor, touch interface, and touch display, for instance. People like him were very critical to tell me what to do, tell me that I wasn't crazy, tell me, you know, do this and not do that. We need to create a club of these people to support the new entrepreneurs. And this means both advice and money, because also in money, there is VC money more and more in these midst, but very often VC money comes with questions such as, what will be your revenues in year 2? Are you going break even? And I do remember when I got so many no's from VCs, because to the answer, what will be your revenues in the next 2 years? It was easy. I was like 0 and 0, and they were like, "Oh my God, are you crazy?" I'm like, "No, I'm not crazy. It's typical." Facebook was 100 billions with 0 revenues. Like, guys, it's the typical game of like trying to do a home run, right? And then they consider you crazy very often because in these meets very often we don't want to invest in risky enterprises, but the risk is there, but it's not huge. It's a calculated risk. You need to be diversified, etc. So we need to create a group of people that know this, have seen it, and also is prepared to put their money where their mouth is. Also, giving the confidence to institutional investors, because it's fundamental to have VCs and funds that follow, but also giving the confidence then for them to kind of put the necessary money, which is typically tens of millions of pounds for every one of these attempts. And sometimes you're gonna burn them. It's like it's normal. Sometimes you hit it, sometimes you don't. So it's normal.
Yeah. Maybe we just want to follow up. Maybe you've been coming across the new initiatives by the EU Commission, Horizon Europe, and the European Innovation Circle. Obviously, EU Commission is going down the path of actually, allowing investments into single companies as well now, in a kind of an incubator and an accelerator path. Do you think that's also a chance to step forward as the continent?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because no less than last week, I was talking to one of the people that will be defining the new strategy of investments of the EU. So, I'm actually actively talking to those people, because I think it's important that those funds are used. So there could be a role also for those. I agree. There must be a role from VCs, there must be a role from those funds, and there must be a role from family offices. Family offices are a great vehicle, because there's a lot of money around. We're not devoid of money. There's tons of money available, and we just need to make sure that it gets channeled into ambition, because the problem very often with European companies is that we have great companies, but they are less ambitious than what you would get in Silicon Valley. And of course, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're less ambitious, guess what? Very likely you will get to maybe a good sizable company, but not a unicorn. You get to a 200 million company. It's not bad, but it's not Google.
Thanks a lot for sharing, Guido. Very insightful. Thank you.
Is there any other question from the audience? Maybe we can still take one, and then we're gonna go to the award ceremony and leave our distinguished guests and panelists and everybody to leave after 3 hours, because I am mindful of the time that Guido and all the panelists have given, and the students. So any question from the audience? No?
It doesn't look like there is any,
okay.
But
so may I ask, while we're preparing for the final, can I ask maybe René just quickly to give an overview about the Jean-Baptiste Institute for Entrepreneurship and all the activities in Europe. Today is an important day because we had the festival across Europe. So we had dozens of startups presented and many other things. And René is our overall leader sitting in Berlin, but overlooking all the activities across the 6 campuses.
Yeah, we're in the phase of new work. So I'm a coordinator more than a leader, I guess. Thanks, Davide. Yes, we just closed the other session. We are all very determined that as of next year, it's very probably be an entirely joint session, but we are very happy that we kind of started to merge campuses. I think it's quite easy. I mean, first of all, Jean-Baptiste Institute is a startup itself, right? So we're only there since 2017 when it comes to the institution of the entrepreneurship department within ESCP. And that was quite a thing because there hasn't been a new department for quite some time. So in that, we are also, well, a startup among many other startups, maybe a little different than the ones that we are looking at here, but for sure not around for a long time. And as such, I think it's important to understand that we obviously are all about entrepreneurship, but then entrepreneurship not only in the startup sense, but literally also about driving innovation, taking on uncertainty in all sorts of contexts. Yes, with an economic perspective, but also much more beyond that, looking also into social, into ecological value creation. So value creation more generally speaking, and then with the connection of tackling uncertainties connected to that. So I think as the SAY Institute, we are trying to be very intensively involved with the entrepreneurial methods that are out there, understanding them, also teaching them. So you could say we are probably in love with entrepreneurship, but not in the, having a crush kind of naive way, but trying to be, more, sober, mature, not boring, having students and alumni going out of our programs who have very well experienced as much as possible in an educational program what it means to do entrepreneurship, to not go out there and think, oh, it's the best thing I should ever do, but actually very informed students as much as possible about what that phenomenon is. So that's one thing all about entrepreneurship. I think second thing is we are all about a community. So there are about 60 people now running around on all the campuses of ESCP. Latest edition, Alisa Sudo on the Turin campus in Italy, which is absolutely wonderful. So we're covering with our 60 colleagues now all the campuses. And this is only kind of, if you like, internal people. We know that we are very happily co-creating teaching programs, research projects, outreach activities, startup development, incubation with our community, which consists of all kinds of alumni and mentors, investors, artists, all these people who are close to us. And I think we don't even, we may know the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a lot more to explore when it comes to this ESCP entrepreneurship community, which we definitely want to grow. And then finally, and that goes just back to the discussion that we just had with Guido, I think we are about Europe, right? And I mean, there's been so much stuff going on in the world now that we may have fallen in love a little bit more again with this wonderful continent, having its issues. So there are the borders, the fragmented countries and stuff like that. But I think this is also a great opportunity to take on out of the SAY Institute within ESCP to work on this, cross-border collaboration, getting past the not invented here syndrome, and trying to really work more into actually creating great European companies wherever they started from.
That's great. Thank you, René. And this is the beauty of ESCP and its setup that is so diverse in terms of geography. But of course, we are centered on Europe, but we are connection everywhere. We got students that they come from all over the world to our campuses, and that really makes a difference. And the JB SAY Institute, it is really an attempt of even boosting further this diversity. And I thank René for his. Although he calls it coordination, I call it leadership, but that's a matter of definition. We are academicians, so we always dispute on definition even. But anyway, having said that, I'd like, first of all, to run towards a closing. And we need, of course, before getting into the prizes, to